Okay, we're going to pick up where we left off last time and just keep messing with functions, except now we're going to add in a little bit more control structure as we're working on our stuff. So let's write a function just qualitatively. Let's think of our function as a box, right? Okay, and then function, we're going to hand it in an input and then it produces some output. All right, and generally we want our functions to have their outputs come out as returns. Okay, that's a good way to write our functions, mainly because if a function returns something, we can feed the returned value into another function, which is really neat. So if you have a function maybe like f of x, which you define, and then you have another function g of x, and they both return values, you can basically make a call like g of f of x. If you don't believe me, we can do that really quickly. Let me just open this up. Okay, and let's define a function f of x, and let's have it, I don't know, return 5 times x. All right. Whoops, didn't spell return right. Return 5 times x. And actually, that was really neat right there. Did you see how when I didn't have return spelled correctly, it was just black text, but as soon as it went actually spelled correctly, it became orange? This is a nice thing that idle does for you, and a lot of modern programming text editors is they'll actually do syntax highlighting, and that can help you, very coarsely when you're debugging, like, oh, there should be, this should be this color, this should be this color. It's very common to see that with whenever you're building strings and stuff or figuring out matching parentheses. Another nice thing is, and this will become more important later on, is whenever you're writing things with multiple sets of parentheses, it'll highlight or point which is the sister parenthesis of a certain parenthesis you're picking. But anyways, back to what we were doing. If we have a function f of x and it returns 5 times x, and then we have another function, let's say g of x, and let's have it return, I don't know, 2 plus x, let's say, okay? 2 plus x. All right, let's save this. Let's call it, I don't know, file 3, just because I want to. All right, we're going to run it. Whoops, unexpected indent. What happened? Uh-oh. Ooh, this is a good learning experience. So in Python, this is actually really good. So for some reason, whenever I open up this text editor, it was already tabbed over. Did you see that? It was like here. And whenever I wrote everything, it kind of shifted everything over. So there's this like fake indent. I'm not sure where that came from. In Python, in order for things to work, we use indents. So inside of functions, you see that there's an indent. And what that's saying is the function we're defining it, and then everything that's indented over is within that function. So we actually need to fix that. So the problem before was actually we started not already indented, and Python doesn't like that. You got to start at the lowest level of indent, which is like this, and then anything inside of the function is indented. Same thing down here. All right, so if we save it now, it should be happy, and it is. So if we were to go over here and then do f of x, whoops, f of, I don't know, 4, we should expect that to return 20, right? And it does. If we were to do let's do g of 4, we'd expect that to return what? 6. Okay, so now let's do g of f of 6. All right, what would that return? So 6 times 5 is 30. 30 plus 2 is 32, so hopefully that should be 32. Yes, it is. All right, fantastic. So that's showing how nice, like, having return values can actually be really nice when it comes to functions. So the next thing we want to do now is add in some sort of, let's say, some sort of a control structure. And a lot of times what I think of with functions is like, they're almost like pinball machines that have no flippers. Well, they can have flippers. We haven't learned about them yet. But like, you have this input up here and you put something in, and then sort of it just falls through, and there's lines of code, and maybe like, plus 2 and I don't know, times 41 or whatever, and the value you feed in, or the values, there could be multiple pinballs, right? But they all kind of just fall down and get processed and then finally eventually spit out. All right, what we want to do is add in another layer onto that. Instead of just taking in a value and multiplying it or adding or combining it with other inputs, we actually want to make some decisions based off of what that value is, and that's going to be coming from if logic that also has else with it, and then sometimes elifs, okay? And so in Python, what does that look like? So let's write a function. We're going to write a function called letter grade calculator. Letter grade calc, we'll call it. And that's going to take in a numerical grade, num grade. And what we want that to do is return the corresponding letter grade for that num grade, okay? And let's assume, if we go over here, we're going to say, delete this stuff, we're going to say that A, this is pretty standard in the US, I think, right, is 90 to 100, B is 80 to 90, C is 70 to 80, D is 60 to 70-ish, right? And then let's actually do an F. It was weird. In my high school, we never had Fs, we had E's. But anyways, that's going to be, what, below 60. Okay, so let's just keep that in mind. That's what we want to actually do. So we want to hand it one of these values and then have it return one of these values. Great. Now, what we need to do is use if, else logic. Okay, so in Python, what you can do is, if we scroll down here, you can do a thing where if a certain condition is met, and this is met if it's true, it's not met if it's false. Okay, so these are actually where we get into the idea of Booleans, which we talked a little bit about in some of the homework. But if this evaluates to true, do some stuff. Then you can do either just a simple else, which is basically if this is false, do this, or what we can do is do elif, okay, all one word, elif. Another thing which we're checking, sorry, and then more stuff, elif, another thing, more stuff, on and on and on, and then we could end with an else. We don't have to end with an else, but we could. And else is kind of like the, if nothing else happened, do this, else, okay? So we're going to do that over here with our grade. So what we probably want to do is right away do, okay, if num grade is greater than, let's do 90, okay? Let's do greater than or equal to 90. Return A. Elif numGrade is greater than or equal to 80 and less than or equal to less than 90, let's do return B. Okay? L, if numGrade is greater than or equal to 70, right, and less than 80, return C. L if numGrade is greater than or equal to 60 and, whoops, I didn't do that one above correctly, less than 70, return D. Alright, else, let's just do return E. Okay, and now if we were to run this, alright, whoops, syntax error, where's that at? Whoops. We're missing a number right here. Okay. Invalid syntax. And, whoops. Oh man, I'm totally messed up today. Okay, we gotta do numGrade. I don't know what I was thinking. Looks healthy. F5. Alright, fantastic. Okay. So let's check it out. So let's do, okay, letter, grade, calc, of what number do we want to put in? Let's do I don't know, 78. What should that do? A C. Okay, that makes sense, right? Letter, grade, calc, 91. Alright, nice. So this is actually working. Now, is this the only way you could have done this? No, there's actually a whole bunch of ways. In fact, some of this coding is actually even unnecessary. If we think about the flow of this, alright, we go in, we start. If it's greater than or equal to 90, we return an A. As soon as a function returns, the rest of the function doesn't run. Okay, so, and also, on top of that, we have this if-elif logic. So what's happening is, if this is true, it just does this and never even checks to do the other ones. We can actually, to emphasize that a little bit more, we can add in print statements. So let's do, let's, instead of returning inside of each of the elif clauses, let's have a value, letter, and let's have that start out as nothing. Okay, and then inside each of these functions, this is where print statements and return statements we can start seeing the differences, but let's print that we're inside of each one of these clauses. So a range, I'm going to just copy paste this into the other spots so we can and what this will do is it'll let us see what parts of the code we've actually gone into as we're running it and debugging it. changing some stuff. D range, E range, okay? Cool. And what we're going to do, instead of returning inside of each of these indent regions, and this is how also too, while we're on the topic, you specify the stuff you're going to do by indenting, just like with the function where the things inside the function are indented, the things inside of an if or an elif or an else are also indented. And actually they're double indented because it's also inside of a function, right? And so instead of saying we're going to return A, we're going to say letter equals A, or we're going to say letter equals B. Same thing here. Same thing here. Same thing here. Whoops. All right, and then at the end, what we're going to do is we're going to return letter. So should this work the same way? Let's check it out. So let's try to do letter grade calc 78. And you can see a couple things. One is because we have these print statements, which sort of gives us an inside view to how the function's working, we can see it actually prints C range, which means the code went into here, into this part of the if-else logic. Nowhere else. And what it did was it went through, if we were imagine, we gave it 78, so it went through and it said 78 is not greater than 90. 78 is not this. It is this, so it does this, and then things are good. Okay, and then it runs. If we were to do another one, okay, and that works too. Now, there's another thing we can actually get rid of, and if we think a little bit more, and this is something where, you know, as you do more coding, you're going to start to see these things, but right here, we're actually saying, okay, if the thing is greater than or equal to 90, right, print something and do this, elif this and this. Now, if you are evaluating this line of code, it must mean actually that this thing was not true. And so by default, actually, this must be true, this num grade part. So actually, this thing is an unnecessary check in this specific context. So we can actually get rid of this and the corresponding ones later and later. And this is a good thing to actually just sit and think about for a minute too. Okay, now if we run this, is this going to work still? Let's take a look. Let's make sure. Okay, that looks good. That looks good. Okay. Now let's think about, like, as you're writing code, we always want to like throw in weird test cases. That's the whole idea. We want to see how valid is this. So if we were to put, you know, I don't know, negative 91, does that make any sense? Whoops, let's not do that, but let's run it. It's an E. Okay, I don't mind that. If you have a negative 91%, I probably want you to have an E, or an E or an F or something. Whoops, didn't we say we said we wanted to do an F in this, but we're doing an E. That's okay. Let's actually change that right now. Whatever. Rerun it. Okay, and then if we were to do this, now we should have an F. Fantastic. What about if we do, what if you got a 101, like you did really well in your exam? Okay, that's an A. That's nice, actually. Why did that happen? If we think about it, we go in, we're a 101. The first check we make is, are we greater than 90? We are. So this happens. And we don't ever actually check any of these other things. Because really, if you think about it, if this were to go away, so let's say like we would actually get rid of this, and we can get rid of that in Python really easy by commenting it out. So we can actually just, you know, go up to format and then comment out, whoops, format, comment out region, okay? Which in Python, comments are code pieces that aren't actually read by the computer but are used for like human notation, right? So if we do that and then run, oh, because I got to actually put my comments, whoops, let's do this. Oh, and then also, you got to get rid of that. And if we were to do letter grade calc of 101, we can see that's going to be a B, because we no longer have this thing where like we're checking, oh, are we greater than 90? We're actually only checking if we're greater than 80. Okay? So this is neat. There's lots of different ways to do a piece of code like this. We can then go back and just uncomment that out. So that's back to normal. And let's make sure this is an elif. All right. An important thing to also remember too is it's if, elif, 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 else, right? If we were to actually right here do if and then another if, what that means is this if analysis is actually done in parallel before, but separate from this one. So even though we do this, it'll actually then check this one as well, because this one is not linked to this. So if we were to run this code and then do our letter grade 101 again, we'd actually see, you can see because of the prints what happened. It went in and it was like, oh, this is greater than 90, so it's an A. But then, right afterwards, because we didn't have an elif, it checked and it was like, oh, this is greater than 80. This is a B range. We can see the B range line came from this. Okay, this is a very common bug. So if we go back and change that to an elif to link it to here, save it, run it, and then let's just paste back in that test thing. Whoops, I don't know what that's from. Okay, A range, and that worked fine this time.